I'm Dr. Juliana. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor. Man Made is a series looking into the journey of becoming a man, and not just any man, a good man. It is not a benign endeavor to seek these two questions. What does it mean to be a good man? And what are the pathways in becoming one? In this series, I'm talking with men from all walks of life, professions, locations, ages, races, and political and spiritual beliefs. I asked these men to represent his own experience and beliefs within his journey of becoming a good man and his thoughts on what is needed to create and support good men in our current environment. My hope is that collectively, these good men's stories form a powerful and private understanding of what it is like to be a good man in this day and age. Welcome to Man Made, my conversations with good men.
I am excited to introduce you to Dolphin Kasper today. And he is coming to us from Canada. As he described it, the Sunshine Coast on the western part of Canada. And I am really looking forward to getting into his view, your view of what a good man is and hearing about your journey as a good man. Welcome, Dolphin. So good to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I love these conversations, so happy to get into it with you.
Great. Okay, so tell us a little bit about you, and whatever that answer feels right, tell us about part of your journey.
Yeah, beautiful. I would say what I've noticed mostly throughout my life is that we're far more the same than we are different. And I think when we're little, it's not easy to see that. We kind of create a sense of ourselves and we use that to make sense of the world around us. And then we start to measure and we start to compare. And so I think, like most people, there was a lot of this kind of internal doubt of like, am I good? Am I worth it? Do people love me? I think we're just inherently referencing that in our day-to-day as we grow up and develop. And depending on the kind of family and community we have around us, we have reflections and opportunities to kind of put unnecessary, unhealthy beliefs to rest. And if we don't have that kind of embodied example, it tends not to go so well, or we tend to have some struggles. And for me, I had an incredible childhood. Like, by all accounts, I appreciate the life I was born into. I feel myself to be incredibly fortunate. And one of the dynamics I was born into was my mom and dad weren't together. So before I was born, they split up. And so there was a missing piece for me. And I did end up having a relationship with my dad. I love him. He's a lovely man. And we weren't that close. I would see him once or twice a year. And my mom never really sorted out her relational pieces to have a partner that would play that role for me, that would play sort of like the masculine kind of example for me. And so I just did the best I could. I think a lot of men can relate to this, whether the father that was there wasn't a great example or the father wasn't there. We're then kind of left to figure out, well, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a man, and what's good and what's not? And maybe we'll get into some of the decisions I made around how to operate in the world in the way I thought was right, without much external support to make sense of that. And of course, made my mistakes, and there's still, it's sort of like excavating a dinosaur bone site. You know it's there. You got to work. You don't want to make a mess. You don't want to break things, but you got to kind of get rid of the sediment that's landed on top. And so, I think that's a big part of us clearing out our past and healing our wounds from our past, is to really be available to dust things off, to look, see, feel what maybe we weren't willing to do so when we were little. And slowly over time, it all does come into focus, but not easily, and certainly not painlessly.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Tell us a little bit about how your personal life journey has intersected with your professional life.
Yeah, it's amazing. Part of my work has been in speaking with and interviewing and interacting with other professionals, other coaches, other educators. And it's so strikingly obvious that our core pieces, especially the painful pieces, are massive motivators in us. And it's clear, it's intrinsic. This is not just someone making a decision to to want to make something better because it was hard for them. They're like, there's something in our DNA that's built to orient towards the things that didn't really get handled when we were little. And so we can bring a kind of magic to those spaces. In its best case, we bring magic to a space that wasn't ideal for us, so that other people can have maybe a better go. But untethered from kind of integrity and authenticity, that can also be a slippery slope, where we go on a crusade that doesn't include our taking care of our interactions with others. Like, we can easily vilify those that appear to be at odds with our mission. And then without necessarily knowing it, we can easily make more of a mess than we started with, even though in our conscious mind, we think that we're out there trying to do the good work and fight the good fight. So for me, it's been absolutely clear that the things that were missing for me were things that I naturally gravitated towards, and that I've been given just countless incredible opportunities to learn, to be taught, to be mentored, and to be invited in to do work precisely in the areas that I felt like I would have loved to have when I was little. So that's a little bit of what it's been like for me.
How would you describe what you do as a profession?
I'm still trying to figure out how to say that. I think I am a facilitator of healing and transformation for others. So at its most fundamental, and that takes on all sorts of, like, again, I have such a wide variety of opportunities to work, because I just, for whatever reason, I keep getting invited to do interesting things. So a lot of it involves me coming in and speaking to groups of people, or facilitating a transformative process for groups of people. Individuals seek me out for the kind of transformation they're looking for. And then sometimes bigger, more complex projects get offered, where I get to kind of come in and bring my magic in hopes to give life to a project that I think will make a difference in the world.
Do you work with multiple genders, or do you have one gender that you're mostly tied with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have a personal preference. I think I bring particular talents and skills to each human being that comes to me. Like, there's areas I'm not the best at. I'm happy to admit that I'm not the best at everything to do with life, but I do have particular talents. And I think one of the main things that I notice is that the work I do is really a kind of based on a transcendent level of what we are as human beings. And so people that want very specific support to a very specific aspect of who they are might not be the right person for me. I'm much more interested in addressing base foundational human struggles versus more contextual, cultural, ideological challenges. And nothing wrong about any of those, just it's not the level that I enjoy working on the most. I most enjoy working on the level where our sense of self and our identity kind of falls away, and there's just a kind of presence and a humanness and a vulnerability. And from that place, actually, we're able to integrate and heal all of the rest of the stuff that's going on.
Ooh, I like that a lot. All right, so I want to get specific into this series and ask you, what did you think when Caitlin told you about the series that I interview men about being a good man? Do you remember your first thoughts or reactions to the title and the concept?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first reaction was like just a warm yes and a warm smile inside. I think there's everyone that is a part of any kind of group in the world has challenges associated with being a part of that group, benefits and challenges. Like, that's just the nature of grouping and sort of tribal systems. And in our world, I think there's so much over-amplification of the importance of the differences. And I think we're able to honor the differences without using them as a wedge or a way to kind of separate us from one another. And my experience growing up as a man was this belief I was supposed to do it on my own. I was supposed to know what I was doing, and I was supposed to do it right. And I didn't know any of those things. And I didn't have a sense that there was tons of support out there for me. And so one of the things I got involved in a very sort of feminist leaning organization that I did some beautiful work with, and I absolutely loved that work. But one of the things that kept coming up was the lack of structure, social service, interventionist support for men that are experiencing difficult things. Lots for women, and in no way does that suggest that there shouldn't be lots for women, but the lack of that for men is staggering. And the consequences of not supporting our boys and men is also staggering. And so anytime a program wants to bring light and invites sort of honest dialogue, I love it. And it's not really about support of men in and of itself. It's that, like, we want to support our humans. Like, we're here together. Mm-hmm. And supporting men is just one avenue, one group, one dimension of that. So yeah, I just appreciate what you're doing.
And it seemed like that touches you too. Like that's a beautiful place. That resonates really strongly with me also. In the work that I've done, I often say that women are hungry to be asked questions about themselves, and men are desperate. And I know that word can feel offensive to some people, but I mean it in the deepest sense, that they are so often, like, men are just, our society doesn't realize how little we create a safe place for men. And a safe place for men to really dive into the deep core, that the work that you're speaking of, when the ego falls away and we're talking about human to human, soul to soul, there are not a lot of safe places that are professionally given to men, but even more so personally. And then, as you were talking about too, like, not a lot of role models of men. I mean, we certainly have, like, the campaign of men can cry, strong men cry, but that's almost a bumper sticker. We need a deep level that is supporting what that looks like and sounds like, and men doing that for each other. And women have done a nice job of creating those places and those connections with each other. We need it for men too, and for them to know things are going to feel better if you do that. So thank you for caring about that, and for showing us that passion in you too, and for the work that you're doing. All right, so I want to ask you, what do you think have been pivotal moments along the way for your personal life that have brought you to moments of recognizing the good parts of you of being a man, as well as mentors along the way, if you've had any that you would consider a good man mentor?
Yeah. You know, like, I can't help but mention my mom in the context of my well-being and my growth. And of course, there were some things that she wasn't able to provide, and I don't think she should have. And she was so good in so many ways, like the foundation of my sense of self, the foundation of what a good man is, I think is in part thanks to her, and the kind of work and the kind of depth of parenting that she brought for me and my brother and sister. And so that was the foundational piece. And then, in a way, it felt like high school and my early adulthood was like, not lost years, but like, it just, I felt like I was just trying to be okay. That there wasn't a lot of mentorship, there wasn't a lot of seeking of answers. I would say some of the most pivotal moments for me have been in moments of loss. So, you know, my first girlfriend, we ended up breaking up after an 8-month relationship or something, and I had made a promise to her that we would stay friends if we didn't stay together. And in the shuffle and the insecurity of adolescence, I didn't take care of that rebuilding of friendship after we broke up, and she ended up passing away about a year later. And that was really shocking to me. It was like, what it really woke me up to was like, I can't afford not to really say it. like what the truth of whatever I'm in. And so that one, like that loss was big. And then there was a kind of a stretch of my early to mid 20s where I was exploring relationship with women, and just nothing was quite it for me. Like I realized I was being protected, like I was protecting my heart. And then I fell in love with 3 successive women over a 2 or a 3 year period at the end of my 20s. And the third woman, it was like a complete shattering of my heart, my ego, I felt broken is the wrong word, but it was like split completely open, and there was nothing left. It was like my life didn't matter to me. And somehow in these moments of loss and grief, I found something really important. Like I found something essential in me that I had been looking for outside of me. So I think those moments were the most profound for me. And then through the
what did you find? What did you find?
Yeah, to put into words. I think in the interest of people who might be listening, something like what we're here for is rarely reflected to us in the modern world. That there's a way in which we've kind of built up our societies, our communities, our networks, our relationships that aren't honoring of and kind of tuned into an essential purpose of being. And without getting too kind of fluffy, it has love at the center of it. And so if we look at how we're operating in our lives, and I think, like the meaning crisis and the epidemic of anxiety and depression, I don't think those are conditions that like fall out of the sky. I think those are symptoms. Those conditions are symptoms of society and a way of living that isn't in relationship with what matters most. And then of course we would feel insecure and anxious. And of course we would feel depressed. Of course we would feel apathy and a sense of hopelessness. So those moments were kind of like the stripping away of all the things I had been holding on to or oriented towards to provide meaning to me in my life. And initially it feels like there's nothing there. This is like the dark night of the soul experience. But if we stay there, if we don't rush to kind of fill or replace or bypass or escape, there is something to find in that kind of open, empty space. And to me, it's like a subtle, almost invisible, yet most profound purpose for our lives. And if we can reconnect with that and then begin to build a life that aligns with that, in spite of how difficult that can be, now meaning inherently, innately, naturally fills our life. It fills what we do. It fills our difficult moments. It fills our vulnerabilities. It fills our relationships with others in a way that allows us to make sense of what is hardest about life. So that's what I discovered.
You're speaking my language there. I have questions about that later we're going to get back to, but I know I interrupted you to ask you what you found. So let's continue back into your journey of moments where you connected with the good man aspect, as well as mentors.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know it when we see it. It's like a resonance thing, and of course there's levels of us. And I often use the metaphor of a choir. Like in a human being, it's not like there's one something or someone. There's a chorus of somethings or someones where we're full of these dichotomies, we're full of these polarities, we're full of these voices. And in some real way, they're kind of their own entities. They have their own interests, their own values, their own ways of being. We know that like the easiest way is like if we grew up with mom and dad, everyone who's done any kind of inner work knows they have mom inside. And they have dad inside. It's like a real someone in them, embodied. And so there's all these voices, and some of those voices are not in our best interest, for sure. Especially if we were told we were no good, or got the message we were not worth it, or people didn't listen, or we didn't have a voice. Those voices will not have nice things to say to us about who we are and what we deserve. but there are always authentic voices there. It's just like, I believe those voices can't be fully quieted because they're inherent. They're like part of our being. And so then it's like when we see something or someone outside of ourselves that resonates on that level, the level of that essential us, we know it. Something in our heart is like, that's it. And so for me, early, it was like literally like movies, and I just didn't have a lot of embodied examples. So like if I read a story, or maybe at school, like I had a couple of male teachers that were great, a couple of male coaches when I was into sports when I was little, that had sort of subtle but profound impact on me. And yeah, I'm just trying to think as an adult, anything like that when I lost my first girlfriend, that was a real turning point for me. It was sort of the beginning of my search. Like I realized I didn't have the answers, all of them, and I wanted to now be I wanted to be my own sort of sovereign choice maker around learning, healing, and growing. Up to that point, I'd been kind of like just going with the flow, trying to figure it out, trying to fit in. And I was like, no. This life matters in a way that I'm not fully tuned into. And I want to get tuned into that. So that was the search. My 20s were, okay, here's a funny one. A big part of my fully stepping into being a man and being what some might call a good man was maybe accidental from a certain perspective. So when I got out of high school, I worked some odd jobs, wasn't really inspired. I think I was about 20, and I got a job with the provincial government in British Columbia. This is Western Canada. And they were sending young people out into schools and communities to do workshops on violence, racism, and sexual exploitation. And there I was. I didn't have a background in leadership. I didn't have a background in public speaking. I just was articulate, and I could stand up in front of a group and feel comfortable. But they hired me. Maybe another conversation.
That's big to step into that subject matter.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. And it felt totally natural to me. And so there I was in front of, it was like some kindergarten shows, like these little 5 and 6 year olds. And then some of it was, grade 8s and 9s, and then grade 12s. We did some college presentations. So I was like, now I'm in front of these groups, co-ed groups, some multi-gender groups, but I was now having young men approach me, like with that kind of admiration. And it was like that. So that for about 10 years, I worked with young people, and a big part of it was with an organization called Safe Teen. And they did gender specific empowerment work in schools. So they were working with young men and young women. And I was facilitating to groups of usually 30 men at a time. And we got into so for 10 years, I probably did hundreds. I did hundreds of these presentations that were like deep, meaningful, authentic conversations with young men about what they believe, what's good, what they hate, what they struggle with, what they want. And so that 10 years was a profound transformation for me.
Wow, it's beautiful. And you were giving what you were looking for too. At that age. That's amazing. And exactly what we were talking about when I was saying that there's little being provided like that. Here you had 10 years of it. Yeah, thank you for that work. So do you align with the phrase good man?
I mean, nothing in me, like I don't gravitate to it, and I have no aversion to it. It's like, I think what registers in me when I hear that is all of the ways we can approach an idea like that, which is, I think it can be approached from the inside out, which is to recognize that, of course, there's goodness in men, all men, maybe covered over, maybe distorted, but there's goodness there. I think that's an essential quality of what we are. And then there's, if I'm disconnected from that intrinsic goodness, but I think I should have it, I should have that goodness, I can pervert my movement in the direction of good. in terms of I can do what I think is good. I can do what I've been taught is good, kind of like playing the part of good. And so, I think the message is great. Like there are good men, and we can all begin to move in the direction of growing up as men, if the conversation is within the circle of men. But I also think there's a lot of misconception about what a good man is. I think there's a lot of misguided information and misguided, again, that kind of, we get into this crusade movement when we have a painful experience and there's a sense in us to write that experience for others. The doing that with high integrity is not so simple. It's not so obvious that we pick up the mantle of crusader or rescuer or helper and do it with high integrity. So for me, that integrity is really, really important. If we want to reach men, young men, older men, and do it in a way that honors their humanity, it needs to be embodied. Otherwise, it's just us sharing some good idea we think other people should take on. So for me, the idea of good man is on a simple level, of course. Like, yes, I love it. I love the idea of more good men in the world. And when I get into the nuances of what creating what we might call better men in the world, is that's a delicate operation. And I would love to see more people that have a deeply embodied knowledge and wisdom about what that is and how to best facilitate that in others.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a difference between a good man and a good human?
In the ways that matter most, no. And in some other ways, yes.
Let's hear some other ways.
Yeah. It's like, just to be really simple and practical about the differences that exist. And of course, there's so much, we're so adaptable. Like human beings are so adaptable. And so men can absolutely be and do all sorts of things that women can be and do. And women can be and do all sorts of things that men can be and do. But when we're deeply aligned and there's no sense in us of needing to perform anything at all, so that our expression is a deeply authentic inside out movement, then there are some differences. And I think we can look to archetypes for like what I would call signposts towards those differences. I don't think the archetypes are the difference. They're just a representation that helps us with a deeper meaning of difference. Mm-hmm. And so, in a simple way, it's something like, when I was coaching, I coached athletes for a number of years. And there are some athletes that require like a really gentle hand. It's like, it might be a year or two of me working with this athlete before I can really push them, because they're just not ready. I push them, they reject, they push back, they get upset, they make me wrong, they quit the program, whatever. And there's other athletes that I can be super hard on, not in a disrespectful way, but I can really push them and they love it and they perform their best with that. So it's like, I can recognize that these humans in front of me in a coaching context, like coaching sport, they're 99.999% the same. And then that 0.001%, the more I know it, the more I understand it, the more I can engage them in a way that they can fully receive me. They can receive my message, they can receive my support, they can receive my love. So it's just a matter of like, can I attune to and recognize the sameness and the difference that's really at play, and then use my own awareness and skills and capacity to leverage that understanding in the best interest of all. I think that's the greatest use of that kind of wisdom and understanding.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's a complicated answer of, there is a difference of man and human and genders. And then there's such a commonality with that. And it depends on who you're asking. What are those differences going to be and how much does that matter? But I like that analogy that you're saying in sports too. I've seen that difference myself. And it's tricky to figure out sometimes which it is, which they're falling into with that. Same with men. Would you be able to stand in front of an audience or in front of someone in your personal, intimate life and claim the statement, I am a good man?
um, yes. And I think my pause is about, I think there's gravity to that question.
Mhm.
And I don't want to just reflexively answer it. So as I'm really kind of checking in. And I think what I'm relating to is what I think most men who are, from the outside, other people looking at them would say they're good men. Where a man who is recognized as a good man by others might be apprehensive to say that is, when we're honest with ourselves, we know we're on a trajectory of development. So we're not there yet. And I think there's some kind of flavor in saying that, like, I've arrived, or like I am it, even though I am absolutely a work in progress, and I'm in my development as moment by moment unfolds. So and that's where, and this is, I think, a dimension that's really worth talking about, is the degree to which I'm a good man, if we're going to get into the subtlest nuances of it, isn't about what I've done. It's about what am I choosing right now? Because there aren't good men and bad men. That's a fantasy. There are choices men make, and those choices can be aligned with what's good, and they can be aligned with what's not good. And so that's why I want to make these distinctions, and I think in this conversation it's worth it, because simple kind of binary answers to these kinds of questions are a disservice to so much of the levels and nuance that are at play.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Ooh, that's a good answer. Yeah, that also resonates strongly with me. And I had one person answer, like, when I asked specifically, what is a good man? And I'm going to ask you that too. And I know it can be hard to nail someone down with an answer and would be held to that. But I'm curious. I want to, and his answer ended up being, a good man is a man who's trying. And it was a sentence. And that felt also profound, that there's an essay behind that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you,
a big one.
Yeah. So to you, what is a good man?
Yeah, I think my best answer to that would transcend being a man. But for me, what makes a man good is essentially his orientation and alignment in where his choices come from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what a lot of people aren't tuned into is that all of the surface choices that we make are aligned to an underlying value set that we've chosen. And so, an example could be that someone could do something that on all accounts is good, right? Like, feeding the poor, or providing medicine to the sick. And for me, the act in it of itself is not the goodness. And there's all sorts of examples we can look at and point to where someone is doing something because they're not okay inside. It's a compensation. It's a cover. It's an attempt to pretend away a dark truth they don't want to face. That's not goodness. It's pageantry. And so, like, for someone to be good, it's not about good acts in and of themselves. Now, I'm not making, acts of service wrong, but acts of service that are not aligned with a kind of authenticity and a willingness to show up for what's most difficult in us. I think they're incredibly superficial in the grand scheme of things. So a good man is someone who chooses what's most deeply true for him, in spite of how difficult that could be, including everyone in the world thinking he's not a good man. Mm-hmm. That's an honorable man. That's a trustworthy man, because he's chosen to reference something that is fundamental to his existence and he won't be swayed by pressure or pain. So when a man operates in that way, he becomes a kind of beacon to the people around him. It's like, oh, you know the truth of what you are and why you're here, and you are willing to pay any cost to be the expression of that.
What does it take to form a man like that?
The easy answer, sincerity. The implications of sincerity is, in each moment, as life arises, first and consistently, you're a yes. You say yes to life as it is, unconditionally. And then from that yes, there's perspective, there's presence, there's discernment. And then there's a willingness to follow through on the truth you discover in that discernment. That, like, there's all sorts of ways we could describe the process, but to me, that's at its core, that's what's operating. Is like, first, a willingness to be with life as it is without any need to protect, to insulate, to escape. It's like, I'm really here with what's occurring. And that's how we see. That's how we discern the difference of values between things. If that presence isn't there, our bias will always be towards some preferred experience we'd rather be having. And then we're blind.
Going back to a statement that I made earlier when we started talking, I'm curious if you agree when I said that women are hungry for a safe place for this sincerity and this, and men are desperate. What was your reaction to the word desperate?
Not much. Again, I think there's always nuance, and this tends to be where I go. So feel free to kind of nudge me in a coarser direction if you want. But to say men are desperate and women are hungry, it's like, well, those are big, diverse groups with incredible amounts of difference. And the meaning I derive from that is that if we think about those groups as having a kind of aggregate level of want and need for being nourished, for being loved, seen, honored, for having an authentic voice in the world, I think men are in a particular place of hunger for that. And then desperation is not a word I feel bad about using in reference to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, to make any statement like that, there's so many intricacies and nuances that goes a part of it. But I remember you had a reaction, and I wanted to go back and fill it. So I'm going to change the pace just a little bit, and I want to throw some words out to you and see what comes to you. A bit of a like word association, but the context of the words are in the mindset of the gender of man, and particularly a good man. But above any of that, or the thread throughout that, is just you. So what comes to you when I say the word vulnerability?
Goodness. Are we doing one words or just
yes, just one
full
word.
of consciousness?
Oh, yeah,
good.
Your reaction can be whatever.
Yeah, goodness.
Goodness. Provider.
Strength.
Love.
Joy.
Protector.
Honor.
Abuser.
Broken.
What is and I acknowledge that I'm speaking in binary terms here with gender, but if the term is good man, what is the word associated with woman?
To me, it just came through as good woman. I don't, it didn't show as different.
Okay, great. When I've kind of done that exercise of if the good man, I found was not benign. People had an opinion about there are no good men, or there are good men, or what is a good man, and it's a serious statement, and it is a joke in some ways, in some conversations. And I was so curious if there was a mirrored image of that, and what word came up for me, and I started floating to people. So I want to see if it resonates with you too, is a strong woman. That is not a benign word coupling. just like good man isn't.
Yeah, and maybe none of them are benign. We all bring our own meaning packages or baggage with us in terms of interpreting language. I know, especially in the work I did with Safe Teen and where there was that feminist kind of ideology and flavor to the work we were doing, like a good woman was often a kind of pejorative term. Like for people, it meant they behaved, they did what they were told, they didn't disrupt things. And so there was a kind of obedience that was woven with the implicit meaning of those words together, good woman. And strong woman, for me, when I just relate to like a deeper place, it just feels good. It's like, yeah, strong women, like for sure. And then there's this place in me that has had so much experience with the ways in which women have kind of been masculine in the absence of that dynamic or paradigm or archetype in their life. So women have had to kind of take on the mantle of masculinity in a way that displaces the rightful femininity that's there. And so then I think there's a kind of mixed bag of a meaning for me when I think of strong women. There's also, it's not the only thing at play, but there's also this thing of like women having to be and do things they're not really meant to be and do because men haven't been around to play their part. And so I think there's always nuances and layers to kind of unpack, but that piece to me, I think there's goodness in that term for me. And there's also the consequences of a world where, actually just at the beginning of this conversation, this idea came to me. It's not the first time, but it was really strong, which is men haven't shown up in part because we don't need to. Like modern culture has created a reality for human existence that doesn't require men to do what they have done throughout human history from an evolutionary perspective. And how do we come to terms with the purpose and meaning of our lives when what our DNA tells us we're meant to be and do isn't needed anymore? Mm-hmm. Like, how do we then make sense of our sense of self and our sense of purpose, our sense of value? And I don't think that's a small piece to engage and to kind of grapple with. And that's same for women. Like, there's ways in which women aren't needed the way they have been throughout human history. And what are the implications of that gap, that liminal period where we're trying to figure out what it means that we don't need to be and do what we used to, and we can fill that space with anything. And then, like, when I do an assessment of modern culture, mostly we've filled it with nonsense. And then each individual human being has to go, what matters to me? That's not a simple question to answer. Or maybe it's simple, but it's not an easy question to answer.
And what do you do when you're answering alongside other people and there's not a common consensus for this? And how do we take all of that and elevate us to a place where it doesn't get filled with other nonsense? It just looks different, but it's really serving us in growing and grounding a new way of looking at gender and a new way of looking at our ways of interplaying with each other. And it's a beautiful concept.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add to that, what you just said, which is brilliant, is I think if we want to do better, if we want to really facilitate and inspire a world to kind of be more connected and integrated, we have to be less certain. Like, I look at what's going on, like, we could talk about anything. We talk about Black Lives Matter. We could talk about police shootings. We could talk about COVID. We could talk about vaccines. We could, like, the way we engage one another when we don't see eye to eye right now is like, and I don't mean this to be insulting, but it's like immature children playing out their insecurities by pretending to be certain. And of course, that's not all that's happening, but it's happening a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's happening in a way that is degrading the kind of cohesion of our culture. And we'll see in the next years and decades the implications of where we've come to, and then the choices we make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that hits something that I think we'll probably talk in your wheelhouse when we have our conversation that you're leading next, which for me, I think one of the most enlightened qualities that we can understand is the tolerance for ambiguity. And when you can have a tolerance for ambiguity, then it really is a healing force as well as a protective force. And again, there's hardly any teaching of what it means to live a life that you can have. You don't have to be certain in order to be sure and grounded. Yeah. That there actually is grounding in ambiguity itself too. But that's another conversation too.
Lovely, and we'll get into it at some point, I'm sure.
Yes. So, and kind of, we're rounding up the last few questions. What do you think the world needs to know about men?
Wow, what a question. I mean, I'm going to reiterate something I've spoken to in the conversation already, which is we are so much more alike than we are different. I think if we really got the magnitude of sameness, it would shock us. And so what we tend to do is we tend to look at the other, whatever that means, the other gender, the other skin color, the other language, the other age, the other type of clothing, like whatever the other is, we look across and we see the difference and we relate to the difference, and then we don't see each other. And so, I think the most important thing is that like a full spectrum of humanness is there in the men in your life. And they may be hiding some of it. They may be managing some of it poorly. They may be attached to things that aren't good for them to be attached to. They may have developed all sorts of behavioral strategies that make it hard for you to be connected to them, hard for you to love them, hard for you to support them. That full spectrum of humanity is there. And I think this is more of a human thing, but like our ability to really love and connect and see and support one another is directly linked to our willingness to have our own inner experience without going away, without shutting off, without closing down, without wrong making. Like these are all outsourcing strategies when we feel uncomfortable, right? We close off, we attack, we escape. That's all a sign that I'm not okay with what's going on in me. And as soon as I'm not okay with what's going on in me, I can't fully be with someone that isn't just the way I want them to be. That's not a good context for human relationship. If I can be really with my own inner experience, even when it's most excruciating to me to be connected to another, I'm now able to be empathetic. I'm able to be compassionate no matter what they do. That is a powerful human being. That's a human being that can reach even the most lost people. So, first, I think it's just that we're all so much more the same than we are different. And then if we really want to connect with men, if we want to empower men, if we want to invite men to be more, it's through our own vehicle. It's through us that invitation happens, not as a concept, not as a good idea, not as an article that you wrote that sets them straight. It's like you in your full humanity, in full connection and relationship with them, finding out what it means to love each other. And then the magic of human relationship can happen in that context.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me and us your thoughts on all this. It's profound. And I think some of it you have to you sit with and let all of those thoughts integrate. I have two final questions for you. Okay. One is, how much time do you spend thinking about you, yourself at, we'll say at 80?
Wow. Explicitly not a lot. In other words, it doesn't come as a specific thought of me with a gray beard and my kids or my grandkids are like, I have flashes of those, and that it's mostly very warming to me to think about being at that age. What I do often is I developed a practice that was shared to me as the deathbed practice, which is to, in my day-to-day, in my consistent living of my life, my death is close to me. The truth of my mortality is absolutely present to me. And that is sort of it's just a consistent there. Like, it's not an explicit thought. It's just, I know this is my moment. There's not a better moment out there to be and do what I know I can be and do.
Great. No one has answered like that. That's neat. All right. My last question for you is, how old are you now? How old are
43.
you? 43. So if we were together and you were turning 80, you and I would sit down and watch this video again, what do you want your 80-year-old self to think of you today?
Look how cute he was. Look at this little 43-year-old guy. Yeah, I mean, I think what I envision and what I would hope is that there's just a sense of like honoring where I was, appreciating the journey that had taken place, and yeah, loving the opportunity to be able to reflect in that way with someone that I shared a moment with.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your thoughts. Thank you for being willing to brave into this space and talk about these topics and answer the questions that you didn't know were coming for you. And thank you, Dolphin Kasper, for being a good man. Thank you so much.
Juliana, I'm just so honored to be invited. I appreciated the time. I love these kinds of conversations. So thank you for the work you're doing. For those listening, I hope there was some value here for you. And yeah, I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.